Can I get a amen?
Amen.
All right, I'm DJ.
I'm Nathan.
I am Deb.
I'm Courtney.
And we're calling all beings. What's up, homeboys and homegirls? Woo! And guess who's backstage, man? A man that's down to about 12% body fat. The party people, put those hands together for the one, the only, the legend, the Joe Rogan of UFOs, James. I come to praise his name, Iandoli.
Howdy.
Yeah, man, James. Yeah.
Looking fly, everybody.
You as well. You as well.
I can't. There's nothing I can do to follow up to that.
You can't.
I'm sorry.
Even tried.
Dude, you don't have to. You're the one person. You're the a one name person. You're like Madonna, in this type of thing. Liberace. Michael. When you say Michael, well, I guess that could be Michael Jackson or Michael Jordan, depending upon who you're listening to.
Yeah.
But anyway, welcome, James, man. It's always awesome. Like I was telling them today, it's one thing, when we interview a lot of interesting people. But when we interview you, it's someone who each one of us has a personal friendship and relationship with you. So it's a whole different ballgame.
I appreciate that. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. And I want to tell you guys, I did an analysis of Elizondo's 4 pages that he put out today, and I wanted to share with you all what my analysis was. And apparently, this is a book about UFOs and disclosure.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Shocking.
Is that on the inside jacket or is that on the...
I think you got it.
Sorry, there was my cheap one for this evening. All right. Let me turn this over to Money Nathan. All right, before we get into any crazier in this thing.
I love it. James, it's so great to have you back on the show. You have been knocking it out of the park lately. Those 2 interviews that you had recently with James Semivan and Peter Levenda, just incredible. If folks haven't seen those interviews, just go listen to them right now, maybe after the show, but right away, because they're really incredible. I don't know how you were able to get so much time with Jim, just one-on-one. That was truly amazing stuff there. So you've had these great interviews, and I know you're really plugged in, and you're always kind of active in the community, if not maybe in the front, but in the back. And I want to get your first impression after that Semivan interview. So, what was your feeling? What did James feel like as soon as that interview was over?
Wow. Well, I mean, I love talking to Jim. I think he's very genuine. And, just for people listening, Jim Semivan, he's a career CIA intelligence officer. And, he did some pretty high up there stuff. And, there are limitations to what he can say publicly. So, I mean, just read the guy's resume, which I think I hopefully included in the description of the video that I did. But, look him up. You'll see. He's somebody who has great access, right? So, and not only that, but he's also an experiencer, and on top of that, he's also very well read. Everybody has seen his library in the back and try to pick out all the books. It's very diverse. So every time I speak to Jim, it ends up being like a really long thing. I think the last episode I did with him was 2 hours, and we spoke another 2 hours off air. This was no different. So I think we probably did like a whole day thing, honestly.
Wow.
it's always great talking to Jim. I think, again, he's very genuine in his opinions. There's limitations to what he can say. And I think, there's a lot of comments, people saying, oh, well, he's just trying to shape a certain narrative, on behalf of the agency. Right. And I don't think that's the case. I think he's, he may have certain opinions that are kind of influenced by his service, by his career, by his training, and by his background. But I think he's genuine in what he's saying. I don't think he's making up whatever it is, like a certain narrative just to misguide people. I think when he says something, he's honestly speaking on his thoughts on it.
Well, I want to get your thoughts too on, do you, as someone who really isn't impartial to the phenomenon because he's been directly impacted by it, it's not something he can just observe at a distance. Do you think that, in your opinion, has Jim processed his experience enough to where he can, look at the landscape and make a more objective opinion about what's going on? Or do you think it still colors a lot of his perception? Because I think I get the impression, James, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, you have a little bit of a different take on what's going on, or the sort of intent or motive behind some of the aspects of the phenomenon than Jim might. So I wonder if you could speak to that to a certain degree, if I'm right. I don't know if I'm correct in that assessment.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's about right or wrong or correct or incorrect. This is, when you delve into phenomenology and people's experience, I can't speak for Jim. I can't say, if his experience is completely processed or unprocessed. That's his own thing. He can kind of make that determination. There's different aspects of that too, right? Like the encounters that I had were seemingly way more positive and affected me in a positive way. And, what I love about talking to Jim is that we are kind of essentially coming from different standpoints, right? And he acknowledges that people have had positive transformations, right? He's really close to Christopher Bledsoe. He's, spoken to Jacques Vallée, and he even cites Vallée's books on people having something of a positive transformation from contact. So I appreciate that he does that. And in the same regard, I appreciate that he has his opinion based on his experience through whatever he experienced. I didn't have the, physical effects that he did in the same way. I didn't have those kind of medical effects that in his case are being studied in some kind of program, which I'm sure we can probably guess a few avenues where who's connected to that program. So I appreciate that he's being honest in the way that he feels and how he's processed his own experience. He said that he didn't really have a kind of positive transformation. But I mean, if stepping back and looking at him from an objective point of view, from an outsider, right? I would say that, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing and pushing for UAP transparency if he didn't have those experiences. So there very well could be elements of his experience that led him down a certain path that he doesn't realize, right? And I'm sure the same for me and everybody here.
Yeah. Before I pass it off to Debs, I just want to say, everybody in the chat, if you're watching on YouTube, if you just hit the subscribe button, you can chat with us. If you have a question for James, you can ask it. If you would like to share some of your blessings, you can hit the super chat and throw $1 at my homie Money Nathan because he need more money. Anyway, I'm just kidding. Give it. He just got promoted. He's doing well. Anyway, let's pass it over to Money Debs.
Okay. I actually think in that conversation, what came to mind was chess. And there's got to be two sides on the chessboard, right? So there's going to be some good experiences, some negative experiences, but it's still the game of chess. And sometimes I think that's what's going on. But during your interview with Semivan, with Jim, I caught something else. I was like, look, of course, listening for anything that was dropped, but I caught you mentioning Aquarius again. So, of course, I have to ask, is there any update on your investigation of Zodiac?
He asked about
Just,
that.
I mean, with that, there's always like little bits and pieces that I come across. I, there are things that I've come up with that I can't confirm, right? And there are people who have that story. They have the story, right? They got the they have the people, some of these 40 or 80 now, whistleblowers, some firsthand and some not, are connected to Zodiac in different ways. But the problem is that reporters can't report on it and do the story that would make the difference if those individuals aren't willing to come forward. And so it's kind of a standstill with that. So if certain individuals decide to come forward, of those 40 whistleblowers, the story could be put out there. Because even if I came up with something, right, even if I got some little tidbit and I just threw it out there, it's not going to have the effect that it needs to have, because it's just another UFO story from some UFO researcher, podcaster on YouTube. But if the story comes out through like a legitimate news source, with an investigative reporter, with the person coming forward with their name and background, and I'd say documentation's probably, you're getting really on a legal thing right there. But if the person's willing to put their name behind it, and or persons, right, multiple people, including a program manager and people that work with them, came forward on the story, then it's going to have the credibility, and people are going to take it seriously. So I have come across bits of it, and I've come across people who have the actual full story, but until those individuals that are associated with that are willing to come forward, it's unlikely to come forward in a big way.
I was hoping you were gonna go, this is the dawning of the age. Okay, you guys don't, the fifth dimension. Come on, man.
5D,
James, like,
man.
I don't
All about
remember
it.
that, man. You do? You know what? You know that
I know.
song?
I've heard the song before.
Yeah, it's a great song. And there's I was about a 1979 movie called Hair, about hippies, hippies in the military, this juxtaposition. And there's a version that slowed down and kind of funked up a little bit of that song. And they're like dancing through Central Park, singing Age of Aquarius and doing these acrobatic moves. And it is worth watching that video on YouTube. So anyway, all you hippies out there, both of us, enjoy. Courtney Connected, ma'am.
Hey, James, I'm going to ask you a tough question, and you can put it any way you like. I'm not asking you to give us what your thoughts are about Jim's mind, but as the interviewer, what did you think when Jim said that he's had access in these higher levels with these groups, and, we know how well connected he is, and that, he's introduced a lot of people to one another who are, disclosure advocates, huge leadership in the community now. When he said to you in the interview that somebody said to him who was on the inside, this is indigestible, right? This is indigestible. But he also said Jim's personal feeling was that this is an inviolable right that we all have to know what the phenomenon is. So, those two things are kind of diametrically opposed in a sense. What did you feel when he was saying that this is indigestible? As an interviewer, how did you take that information, and then how do you translate it for all your audience, the people who are listening it and like, what's your speculation?
Like an uncooked T-bone steak. That kind of.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
The doneness. Give us the doneness.
So, I mean, when Jim said that he got those read-ins, I believe what he's saying, and I know exactly what he's talking about, and I'm aware of that, right? And we've heard Jim say maybe on occasion that, and Tom said something similar, but Jim got the real read-in, right, because of his access. that he heard this and didn't sleep for 3 days, that kind of thing.
Oh, he did say that.
Yeah, he said that a while. I don't know which interview it was. I don't know if he said that to me in the past interview or other interviews, but he had said that. We've heard Tom say that a few times. So there's a few ways that you can kind of look at. I mean, a lot of different ways you can look at that, right? Whoever gave them that read-in, what level of access did they have? Or, Jim always talks about the 30,000 foot view, right? Maybe he had a 10,000 foot view, and whoever read him in had the 30,000 foot view. Well, who has the 100,000 foot view? As whoever gave him that read-in could also be protecting the program to some degree, but are still going to read him in on part of it, right? Whatever they feel his need to know is. And for whatever their purpose is for the program. So to ever say that anybody's ever has the complete read-in, I don't know anybody that's ever said that to me. I've heard of people who have gotten read in on different levels, and they all react differently to that information. I know somebody else who had that read-in who's definitely, at least when they speak publicly, not as kind of, I don't want to say paranoid, but Jim seems to be very like hyper aware and conscious and sensitive about it. And I get it. Again, his background is in intelligence and he's defending the United States and that sort of thing. So these other people have those kind of backgrounds to an extent too, but not like Jim. So it's interesting to see that these different people in the Invisible College or Fight Club, whatever you want to call it, they all have different perspectives, right? Maybe they have different bits of information, different backgrounds, and that influences their ultimate decision. But, on where they stand on the phenomenon and if it's positive or negative, but also, when it comes to Jim, you have to read, right, he's saying one thing and it seems diametrically opposed, but, ultimately, right, I'm looking at his actions. And as far as I can tell, he's trying, he wants the transparency. He's making moves in that direction, not the other way around. He could just shut his mouth and walk away and, never have anything to do with the subject or try to lend credibility to it whatsoever, but that's not what he's doing. So I think on some level he's kind of conflicted about it, but ultimately he's taking the steps that are assisting people that are trying to push for transparency.
I was going to say the purpose of what you say, I agree with you, James. The purpose of sensitive compartmentalized information is that if you take one individual and you read him into every single program, how exposed are you?
Yeah.
I mean, you're totally exposed, rather than just give them what they need to know in order to execute their duties. So I don't know if there is a person who's read into every program about every piece of material and or craft and or being that we've ever had. I maybe,
yeah. Well,
I doubt it. So.
I'm going to take a wild guess here and say, also, we've all heard of MJ12, and we've all heard of Zodiac. So I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that those are 12 different compartments. That could
be. Absolutely. It absolutely could be. I mean, it totally makes sense that if you were at S4 and you were read into that program, how do you have a need to know what's going on at Dugway or what happens at Wright Pat or what happens at China Lake? You just don't need to know that, so that I suspect that. But my question is, now that we can get to my question instead of my hypothesizing, they came to hear more you about yours. So James, as he can you expound upon maybe what he told you about the structure of knowledge and how the executive had a lot more to do with this than probably I thought and the rest of the cabbies before your interview. Like, he talked about the limitations that Congress would have. He talked about what it would look like if they took a Marco Rubio or somebody that said, I demand to be read in, and they, okay, let's go, I'm going to read you in. Now you're bound to secrecy, and the information was essentially useless to you. So what did you learn from him about the structure of secrecy and how that is intertwined specifically with the National Command Authority, the president, et cetera?
I mean, what I took away with it, and again, right, you mentioned Marco Rubio, and we know OSAP, right? This whole like initiative was, facilitated by Harry Reid, who we, I can't say 100% certain, but when I interviewed Danny Sheehan, and I mentioned the intact craft that was apparently in the possession of the United States and/or a contractor that, Jim Lukatsky talked about in the book Initial Revelations. Danny Sheehan said, Harry Reid was the senator who Jim Lukatsky was referring to in the book and couldn't name. And I'm sure that was everybody's first guess. I'd say he's probably correct. So you had somebody on that level, right? Gang of 8, Senate Majority Leader, who allegedly had not just like, UAPs in the sky, whatever, he had knowledge of fully intact craft that was in possession of the United States and or contractor. So you saw from back then, 2008, Harry Reid going through those channels, right? Trying to work his way around and get some of this out, right? They wanted to study it too, right? But they were also trying to gain access to it through different means, through official channels. But what Jim is saying is similar to things that Grant Cameron has been saying, is that, the executive authorities, and here's the thing, right? So people are like, oh, Jim doesn't know what he's talking about with congressional. The CIA is in the executive branch, right? They work for the executive. So Jim would uniquely have an understanding of how and why, and especially when it comes to the subject. So people who are saying that, like, look at Jim's background, what he's doing, CIA executive, right? The Zodiac, right, is allegedly taken over by CIA in the 70s. And the retrieval program, of course, I asked Jim about the Office of Global Access, and he cannot make a public comment on that either way. I had to do it just for the record, but he couldn't.
Hell yeah.
But maybe next time I'll work around the question a different way and we'll get something from it. But that's anyway. So we all heard about Clinton going after this issue in the 90s, right? And he had limited. I mean, he basically didn't get anywhere. It was a good push and it was a good initiative. You had the Rockefeller Initiative. Stephen Greer's Project Starlight was kind of intertwined with that, or hijacked by it, however you want to see it. And there was progress made, but, again, according to Stephen Greer's source, which I can't vouch for, was that they said to Stephen Greer that, one of Clinton's people that was investigating this, that if the Clintons felt that if they pursued this, that he was going to end up like JFK. So the idea was that he didn't use his full executive authorities to try to chase this, because maybe it could have been he thought they were going to character assassinate him, or
there's information that he wouldn't want out there.
Right. So there's different. He doesn't have to necessarily have harm come his way directly in a way that we're thinking, although that could happen. But I think what Jim is trying to say, and what Grant Cameron is saying, is that originally the secrecy started with an executive action, and it's going to take some kind of executive authorities. I mean, maybe there are workarounds, and that's what they're trying to do with Congress. I don't know if that's ultimately to pressure the executive branch, to have the executive acknowledge the entire thing, and that's why they're trying to put this panel together and so forth. but ultimately the executive powers could, if exercise, could, do the deed and get disclosure done. I think that's ultimately what he's trying to say.
But yeah, just he had so much to lose. Like when you have a guy like George Herbert Walker Bush that's like squeaky clean, there's nothing they have on him. I mean, he's already been CI director. He's already been through the polygraphs and the whole 9 yards. So, but when you have somebody like, let's just say some of the presidents we've had lately, there are some of them that have a lot that they wouldn't want out there, and it's a pretty easy threat to get them to stand down. So yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, George Bush Sr. was allegedly part of Magic. That's
Right.
that's been a rumor, and he was also, it depends on what sources you're going by, but allegedly when Jimmy Carter was trying to inquire on this, and Bush was his CIA director, he said, like, go somewhere else. And I believe that story is true, and I believe that Bush Sr. did have involvement in the issue.
Jimmy Carter had an SCI clearance because he was in the nuke program as a naval. I mean, he was a naval cadet for one thing, but after that, he was in the Rickenbacker nuke program. So he had a clearance, but who knows? I mean, like you said, they have to want to push it, maybe, and it's very interesting. You brought up a good counterpoint to Jim's point. So,
just as an aside, DJ,
Yes,
I just wanted to chime in on this because Danny Sheehan did talk about this, about the congressional report that they were doing. And, Danny was involved with it. And he talked about how Carter had said to Bush, I want these files. And Danny said that Bush basically said, well, make me CIA director. And, and it was this, quid pro quo deal. And there was huge fallout. So I just wanted to mention that in relationship to what you're talking about with Carter and Bush, because there was a linchpin there with the UFO files. It's pretty important.
This topic gets more and more curious. Before I pass it to Nathan, I do want to say something I forgot to lead off with, James. Your interviews have been super duper inspiring to us as content creators. They're just so well done, and you're just so damn good at what you do. So I just wanted to say that to the audience before I pass it on to Monet Nathan.
Yeah, I want to get your sort of pulse on the disclosure movement. So if we rewind to last summer with David Grush and kind of where we were thinking things were at that moment, the NDAA seemingly like a good chance of getting passed, and then of course the last minute getting scuttled, and now Grush being relatively silent. New NDA language being introduced this year, but it's an election year. We've heard rumblings there are going to be some interesting kind of documentaries on the horizon before the year is up, and we all know that James Fox's documentary, The Program, is coming out pretty soon. Lou's book, which was in the news cycle today, is coming out imminently. In your opinion, is this year going to be a forward momentum year compared to last year? Or you think we're going to continue to sort of tread water a little bit?
I mean, I don't think we are treading water. I know it seems like that, right? Because we're all just waiting for this big drop to be told. But I mean, I remember being in this field in like 2009, 2010, like even publicly then, but kind of I was kind of more not known really. But I mean, you'd get some wacky UFO story that made the news, and it was like a celebration, like, wow, guys. Of course, Stephen Bassett back then was always saying disclosure was going to happen any day. God bless him. No, but I mean, like the significance of everything that is going on, right? It's like being in the eye of the storm, right? Everything is in this kind of slow motion nexus. It's, we have all these amazing things happening. There are whistleblowers coming forward with incredible credentials. I mean, David Grush, I mean, even Lou Elizondo, to this day, we were waiting for somebody like Lou to come forward for so many years. And he did, right? And it's kind of like we're spoiled, right? In the kind of UFO news research community. And I know there's people that kind of see it like disclosure is going to happen any day. Disclosure is never going to happen. They're never going to tell us. And then you have a different perspective that's saying, well, there's disclosure going on right now, but what's actually taking place is that they're shaping a narrative and they're doing this conditioning perception management process. So when they do the disclosure, it kind of works out for everybody, right? I mean, that's the optimistic way of looking at it.
It's
right?
like already an accepted fact at the point that they officially announce it.
Yeah, but I mean, they're also like the establishment is not going to release it in a way that's damaging to them. I mean, they're going to mitigate as much damage as possible in the process, right? So, I mean, why wouldn't they? If it was me and I was doing it, I would try to do the same thing, I guess, right? So there is a lot of perception management going on, right? To try to figure out what the perception management aspect is another part of the story. It's just something that we have to be aware of. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily evil or negative. I don't think the intent even behind perception management, even if I don't agree with it, is nefarious. It's what they're going to do, right? It's inevitable that they're going to do a perception management campaign, and that's just part of the process. I mean, we have to do our part; they have to do their part. And I'm not trying to make it us versus them. It's not really about that, right? Like, there's probably people working together on both sides on the thing, right? And trying to find a middle ground. And I think part of that is even with the disclosure plan, right? And it's got this timeline and it's 7 years and this is going to be the plan. And so they're proposing this idea that's digestible rather than indigestible. So controlled disclosure versus, so-called catastrophic disclosure.
Hey, James, can I piggyback on that? Because you and Jim touched on this. What if it's that they don't know if they're going to disclose, and so you have to prep for that possibility that you may not be in control of that disclosure. It only takes one craft hovering over a major city with news cameras on it. That's it. That's all you need, and they can't know that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and also, like, they realize now, wow, holy shit, you had Lou Elizondo come forward, you had David Grush come forward, Christopher Mellon is like assisting this entire process. There's other whistleblowers that have gone to the Inspector General, the Intelligence Community Inspector General. There's a lot of different things that could happen any day, right? Another whistleblower of David Grush's pedigree coming forward would really make a lot of people think twice again. So it could be a number of things that's going to happen that's imminent, right? That could change this entire conversation overnight. And to not take that into account and try to prepare for that would be negligent. So I think that it would be in whoever is gatekeeping the information to begin to try to work with people to put it out there, because it's ultimately not going to last. It's obvious at this point.
That's a great point. And Julie says that's not. Julie says in her opinion, that's not all you need. That people are so distrustful. That's, you know what, you make a great point, Jules. But before we pass it over to Debs, I want to say hello to everybody in the chat that's turned up here. We have Joya LaRock is here. Mark G, Anon ET is here. Lisa, welcome. We said hi chat wise, but I don't know. It's a couple of you, Susan, a couple of you haven't been to Calling All Beings before. Rebecca, welcome. Anon ET has been around for a minute. Philip,
did you guys have him on yet? You got to have him on.
No.
I know him for many years. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, from the C5 work, and
he's open to it.
I will say
sure,
I have
yeah.
tried, and he knows that I have tried.
He might be a little shy. Yeah, I had him on once, but I know him for many years. So
Awesome. He always comes in and supports us. So thank you, Anon ET. That's great. He
Yeah,
made this symbol
Grant.
right here. So I said maybe he knows you're a paisan. I don't know. Maybe he's Italian. So anyway, all right. Money Debs, take it away, my friend.
So, speaking of people being distrustful, a name keeps popping up. His name being Kirkpatrick. What do you think he's
Please.
doing? Why does he keep coming back to a topic that he expressed such disdain for? Why does he keep coming out to talk to people?
Yeah, I mean, I've never spoken with him. I don't know the right people to that know him in that way to say he's this kind of person and this what he's doing. From my perspective, it looks like he's obfuscating, right? He's apparently been given the right information to act on. However, even Jim, I don't know if we said this on air. No, I think there was a part of this that we had discussion off the air. It's nothing damning to Jim, but I mean, Jim was even saying like, you may think you have these kind of authorities, but it's a different story in real life, right? Like if whoever tells him to like step away from it, it would be he's not going down. He's not sacrificing himself over the subject, right?
Obviously.
If the right person tells him like, just do your job on this and whatever that is, he's just going to follow orders, right? What is he? There's even if he's told where to find certain things, that doesn't mean he's going to find it, right?
That's right.
Could he technically? Maybe, right? Is it something he wants to do? That's a different story. So I don't think he's an evil person, right? I think he's just trying to finish out his career and do his thing. This subject doesn't mean to us what it does to him, and vice versa. This is not something that he seems to really care about, right? He's just doing a job, right? He's going through the motions. This is like a 9 to 5 to him. That's the way I see it. It doesn't seem like he really cares for it much. I don't think his true goal is transparency. I don't think it matters to him one way or another.
I don't know. I was just going to say, I don't go talking and doing articles about things I don't care about at all. It just seems a little weird to me.
Well,
and to assume that could be a number of things, right? A few of these like UFO people could have pissed him off, and he's like, you know what, screw you guys. I'm just gonna like throw mud on this. Could he have been chosen because he is a yes man and he's gonna go on that track? Could be, right? Like even within the program, right? The UFO program, allegedly they are gonna analyze somebody, and they're only gonna pick people that have a certain profile to work in the program, right? So like if he was selected because he's a company man, right? He's only going to benefit from doing what they tell him to do.
Can I speak on this for a second? Because I've worked inside government and worked for people that are on his level. So what we know about him is like this. There's a whole person that we don't know anything about this man at all.
Right.
We know his resume and his public statements. What I can tell you for sure is working in that position is you have two choices. If they tell you that this is a line we're going to take and this is what we're going to do, you either do that or you do what Elizondo did and you turn in the resignation letter. Those are your two choices. That's it. It's not like what I work in the aerospace industry now. I've worked in government. It's a different ball game. They're telling you what you're going to do, or you can take a walk and they will find a way to get you out of there.
Somebody else will do it, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and to make their way up.
100%.
And I don't think that Lou and David Grush get enough credit for like, here I am, an experiencer. I don't know if I could. I still work my job, right? And I do this stuff when I can. Like, if somebody said, "Hey, listen, you have to quit your job, get rid of your pension and your health benefits that support your children and your entire family," it's the only way you can talk about this subject. It's like, wow, man, I don't know if I could afford to do that. And Lou did it, right?
Damn right.
David Grush did it. That takes a lot of. It's not just them; they have families, right? Like, I don't understand that people who overlook that or undermine it is like, what is like? It's just like completely incompassionate.
It's two things. It's not stupidity. It's ignorance and a lack of empathy. Ignorance doesn't mean they're stupid. They just don't know. They think they know. And then it's just a lack of empathy to be able to place themselves like Lou at the time, who had girls in college and doing that and what that meant. And, oh, he's going to write a book. He'll make it all back. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about, dummy.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Like the pension.
And with, yes, the pension is enormous. The 401k is enormous. It's a lot of money and security that guy gave up.
And the benefits, right? The benefits of working.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's a different story, man. If somebody even offered me $50K more, which they did for like a director's different position in my job, I didn't take it because I wanted to stay with my benefits.
Yeah, I mean, he probably has TRICARE for his family. So he probably has that coverage where if it were a person who didn't have a military retirement and they left service prior to that 20 years, they might not be covered. So he may have some, but he definitely doesn't have his 10% 401k, and he definitely doesn't have his compounding retirement check that is going to be way bigger than his check as a major from the military. I'm going to tell you. So I also want to say something about Kirkpatrick that relates to ignorance. I have heard content creators assert that it is ineptitude is why he says and his office says and does the things that they've done. And it's like, if you think that, then you really don't know what it's like to try to get a job at the Pentagon and get one of those staff positions. These are extremely competent people, and I'm going to assume that everything they've done is purposeful and has been crafted very carefully. And if you assume less than that, that's fine. That's very charitable, but it's not stupid. It's not that they're dumb or they're inept. They're very, very, I know a lot of staff officers from the Pentagon, and they are the best of the best. And whatever they've done and said has been for whatever their reasons are. So that's all I want to say about that. And pass it on to Courtney Connected.
Hey, I'm going to switch gears radically. So one of the things that, sorry, one of the things that I want to bring up that I was on 2 years ago, you had done a great interview, and I just want to refamiliarize everybody. You had done an interview with Richard Dolan about Zodiac and Sedge Masters and Greg Halifax, and that kind of got buried, and people weren't paying attention to it, but I was. And so I was tracking that. I went and downloaded all the Sedge Masters articles, read everything, and just kind of put it in a file a couple years ago and thought, this is important, right? So it came back up on Twitter a couple of years ago, and I brought this to people's attention. They were all like, oh my God, Sedge Masters. So I just wanted to ask you about how much you were able to confirm about Sedge Masters and Zodiac. You did a great interview with Colm Kelleher and George Knapp. And, you know, that was all kind of connected, and they couldn't respond or answer you about Zodiac. But how far did you get in all those interviews and all that investigation you did all the way up into your last interview with Colm Kelleher? Were they able to say things off the record that they couldn't on the interview with you, or was what they said on the interview all that they could say, and that was it?
Colm has a security clearance, so he's never going to speak out of school, right? I mean, George, on the other hand, might give me tips, advice. He's not in the same boat. So, I mean, I got pretty good confirmation through different people, not just them, about Zodiac. And, you know, Jacques Vallée's book also mentioned Zodiac kind of in passing, Forbidden Science Volume 5. And, you know, people know the name of the lawyer. It's out there, Jeffrey Griffith. And no, he's not answered. Different journalists had tried to speak with him. He's not talking to my understanding.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. That's kind of where I was going, because they're on the Wilson notes, and there's this whole history with
right.
and the other woman from TRW that were listed and how that was all connected. So I wondered if you talked with the lawyer, and you haven't.
I did not. I did not. As you know, I believe that Richard Dolan was correct, and that was the lawyer, and I'm sure that other people were able to confirm different parts of that story through their sources, but again, it's not going to come out unless people are willing to put their name behind it, because it's just another UF story. You know, you're going to have another incident where we have Tom Wilson, and he's just denying everything, and then now it's fake. It's more fake because it's Tom Wilson himself has said, "Oh, it's poppycock, right? There's nothing to it." And we're just going to end up in another situation like that. So again, that story is not really going to move forward unless the people are willing to put their name behind it.
It seems like they're not. So
not yet. I mean, it could.
Yeah.
It could happen. It could happen. It could happen tomorrow. I mean, I don't know. People didn't really see David Grush coming. I'd heard about him and all that maybe 16 months at least before he came forward. That something along the lines of that was going to happen, and I was optimistic, but I wasn't holding my breath. And then one day I woke up and it happened, right? And I was exciting. Like, holy shit, that's what they were talking about. So, you know, I kind of have the impression, I don't know this, right? I have the impression that, you know, you have these different people coming forward and they're putting forward that the UAP Disclosure Act is kind of like a negotiation, but also a negotiation that's an ultimatum, and that, you know, something is going to give eventually, and hopefully in their eyes it doesn't have to be the catastrophic version, which is the alternative to people not cooperating with the control disclosure plan. So if the people that are involved don't go along with the control disclosure plan, they are risking the scenario of it going catastrophic, right? Again, and that's just a word that Danny Sheehan had said came from the people within the program. So the ball's in their court in that regard. But I do think that there are people on both sides trying to be reasonable and work it out. But at the end of the day, somebody that is in the program might be like, screw this, and just decide they're going to go catastrophic, and they don't give a shit about the controlled disclosure plan anymore because they don't have the patience for it, and they think that their time to do whatever they can is running out.
And you know, I had this conversation with Richard Butt a day or two ago. I asked him about this I know it's hard to say. He's the one who named himself. So I just
can't. Every time it comes up, I'm just like, slapstick comedy. It gets me every time. Like, what?
That's not his real name.
Why did he do that?
James has spoken with him. James has spoken with him. He's a very serious guy. He really is.
Well, because he's been out on Twitter, so that's what that's worth.
Yeah, I asked him about this hypothesis because, again, when you see something happen within government and you say, "Oh, what happened? Why'd they do this?" Well, the why is a great question because we don't know why they put eminent domain in there. But what I know personally in my own mind, I don't know this to be a fact that I could back up, is eminent domain is not an accident that it made it in there twice. So
Right.
if you know that, if you can take a thermometer and go and take the temperature of America and go, there is no stomach for anything like eminent domain, that in 1947 people would have said, oh yeah, sure, come on in to my ranch and look at my craft if you want, and take it. You know, now you'd have cell phone cameras, you'd have lawyers there. It'd be, you know, someone's on, you know, it's a whole different America. People don't trust government the way that they did then. So to put eminent domain in again tells me they want the bill to fail. That's on purpose. What we don't know is why. I don't know why they want it to fail. So we asked Christopher Sharp. He's really smart. He's got sources in DC. And he said, because I believe, or I heard, they've been told by certain agencies that things about them could come out that they wouldn't want to come out if they were to support this bill. And so you have to have plausible deniability for it not passing. And so therefore you have to put in a lark that will make it not pass. And there we are.
Can I chime in on this for a moment,
Yes.
DJ?
I just want to say thank you to Jason, our first ever super chat. Thank you, bro, man. We are $1 closer to paying for StreamYard and Spreaker. Thank you, bro, man. Appreciate you. This is a historic day. It really, really is. Thank you very much. And we will get your question in there. You got the next one. Go ahead. Money Debs.
So Daniel Sheehan was recently on a podcast called Vetted that YouTube was pushing forward for me to watch. So I was listening to that. And he commented on the eminent domain because he's part of the team working on the legal text and whatnot. And he was saying that the United States always has had eminent domain, and that they're kind of like legally protected to have it, essentially. That was his point of view.
If you can demonstrate like a national security imperative, which, I mean, if it's a piece of metal, if it's at Skinwalker, is there a national security imperative? It's gray area.
It's not always national security. It's also
Right.
in right of way in people's properties, and if there's some type of access that the government needs for utilities or other things, it covers minerals, gas, oil, energy. I mean, it's not just national security.
Right, but to take something, you know what I mean, is it different? Like to take something from, for example, Brandon Fugel. You know, could they say, oh, we have a right of way situation here?
Or Jacques Vallée, you know, he
Or
was
Jacques
a little
Vallée,
concerned about it
you know.
because he has a collection.
Yeah, we want to build a road through Skinwalker Ranch, you know, so you'd have to say a certain national security, and then you'd have to back that up. Because obviously, if you got a guy like Brandon Fugel, he's going to take it to court, and he has the money to take this all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. They can't bankrupt him.
Look, you're touching on some touchy areas, because there was a lot of us lobbying for that bill, and we were lobbying for it to go through, and we didn't realize that there were other people lobbying against it because of eminent domain. There was a lot of us who had no idea that there were other leadership in the community that didn't want the passage of the bill because the eminent domain carve out. So I think that's important that you bring it up, and that, you know, things were not transparent at the time. Everybody was pushing for it, but some people weren't. So it's great that you brought it up.
I mean, you also have to question if the eminent domain was taken out. Is that a deal breaker? Does that mean that the bill is going to go forward, or is it, what's the next thing going to be that people are like, no, now this, right? So no, really, because I think
I agree. I'm laughing.
Eminent domain is also part of a negotiation tool. So whatever side can leverage their interest and say, okay, we will pull it out.
I feel like the implication was they didn't even need to put it in there because the military has it anyway.
Well, I mean, I think the argument against that is that if a contractor has it, the government doesn't have the right to take technology that was inspired by XYZ. So if somebody made a technology that was inspired by UFO technology, it's theirs, regardless of, you know. So does the government? And Richard Dolan made a really, really good point that I hadn't thought about. Is like, some of this stuff that the technology that's been reverse engineered is like the stuff that we can actually use, right? Rather than the source material, say. That stuff has got to be really valuable, even compared to the stuff that is the real deal UFO technology, because it's applicable and it's been.
But my assumption would be those are under contract to the U.S. government. So even though they're being reverse engineered by a third party, they are under contract, and so the U.S. government owns that material. And owns that craft, whatever that is. They own that, so it's
But I know what you're saying, DJ, and you're correct. But I mean, like, I'm sure that these companies like have thought of like a million different ways to have this company, that's this company, that's this technology that belongs to, workarounds.
Absolutely, they've probably leveraged that technology against a completely different leverage what they've learned against a tangential technology, that was extracted from what they learned under contract, and then they use that technology to build something. There's a lot of scenarios that exist here. This is super duper complicated, and there's these companies have lobbies. I think we all know that. Let me get to the super chats. I want to say thank you, and they have some questions for you, James. So I'd like to honor those guys. We really do appreciate it. So Jason M, thank you, Jason, for our first ever super chat, and he says, James, I'll read this money, Nathan, in that great voice that you have.
I'll do my best. Thank you, Jason. So what is the big secret that kept Semivan, that's good, up for 3 days? I don't think you could tell us, but I don't think he told you. Semivan sounds like Jennifer or Jennifer. Semivan. I don't think you know the answer to this, but and you maybe can speculate on it though. And what do you think kept him up for 3 days?
He's not going to tell me that, apparently. Again, but we heard Tom say the same thing. Tom doesn't have a clearance. I don't know if they were told the same thing. I can only speculate based on what Jim is saying publicly. And he keeps, every time you ask him what is so disturbing about this, that the people can't handle it, right? And he keeps coming back to this thing of it's indigestible, but people have the right to know. And then he gets into this consciousness stuff. I can only imagine that it has to do, again, if I was just to take a guess on what it is that, again, this is a guess, that our religions are wrong. These beings allegedly engineered us for whatever their purposes were, and we're kind of like cattle to them in some regard. Not completely, but, I think those kind of themes and ideas is where that conversation leads. But again, I always come to the point of like, what level kind of is read into that aspect, and is that even true? Is that, who knows? I really don't know. I don't believe that to be the case. Could be wrong. I'm kind of optimistic generally. But again, when you have really, really senior people with all these crazy clearances and evidence of the phenomenon, and they come to you as somebody who's an intelligence officer with clearances, and they tell you certain things, it's kind of probably convincing, especially if your thinking is already kind of in that kind of field. It's only going to fuel and empower what you already believe. It's going to reinforce that. I don't know if that's done intentionally or if that's what the truth is. I don't know.
Yeah, and I first of all want to thank Andrew for his super chat. Andrew, thank you so much. I know who you are, and I really appreciate it. But this subject, James, is sort of taking us where I'd like to go in the last few minutes of our conversation, because to me, the there are two sort of things I think that would cause this kind of reaction. So one is an ontological shock type of situation where you're questioning everything you think you know about what reality is. That could absolutely be disturbing enough to where you could lose sleep. It changes your ontological perspective on the world, reality, everything. The other one would be existential, right? So that there is something outside of your control that you now know about that is an existential threat to both your own life and the lives of those that you care about. Now that would make me lose sleep as well. So I mean, and it's not to say it could actually be both of those things, ontological and existential. And so what I want to get your thoughts on, because you just mentioned you are an optimistic kind of guy. That's one of the reasons why I love you, because I'm also an optimistic kind of guy. But you're pretty plugged in. You're an experiencer. We're getting a lot of sort of traffic, I guess you could say, in the experiencer community and circles that there is this sort of sense of something impactful on the horizon. There's varying interpretations of what that might be, but what's your sense of that? Here I'm thinking, alluding to things like Ramirez, who said 2027, others, Bledsoe, who's given similar kinds of projections. So what is your take on those sort of feelings or senses about the near future, and also how that relates to what we just talked about, and that's this legislative push towards disclosure and wider acclimatization of the subject?
That's a tough one. I mean, in regards to existential and ontological, I think ultimately it depends who you're talking about. As far as ontological, I mean, I kind of think that maybe, and I hope I'm not being too biased here, but younger generations kind of take for granted the paradigm of like non-human intelligence. Like we grew up with E.T., the extraterrestrial, and all these things. Even the show my kids watch, and all these shows, there's aliens and all these, it's not even just extraterrestrials anymore. Even in these little kids media, there's like interdimensional beings, time travelers, and all that thing. And it's this, kind of a thing. I'm trying to, Sean Espion Hargens brings up of doubles, but in like a different way. It's like double talk. They're telling us both things. They're telling us, oh, look at all this stuff, and it's in all our programming. And then at the same time, they're saying it doesn't exist. And Tom DeLonge made some really interesting comments about that thing. I included it, the clips in one video. I don't even remember which video I put it in. But it, I think that as far as the timeline thing, I don't know. We can say for certain anytime that there's a date that something's going to happen. When it comes to kind of predictions, I've never really seen one of those come true, and I've seen so many. So I wouldn't hold my breath on that. Could they have been given some timeline? Sure. Like people have talked about, there's been these messages and crop circles before that were kind of referring to these different type of alignments as well over the years. And there's been crop circles that communicate kind of different ideas that are similar. Or even that, again, there's the idea of, we're awakening consciously in the age of Aquarius and the Dwapara Yuga. And I think ultimately, yeah, that's right. Like, whether it's on some kind of schedule or not, I think it's inevitable that we're gradually becoming more aware of our reality on a daily basis at an incredible rate nowadays. It's unbelievable. Just like, not even just UFO, whatever, just like science, AI, and all these things. Like we're discovering all these, the Nobel Prize winner a few years ago was for non-locality, right? Like just the day and the age that we're in is like, yeah, we're about at the right time for this kind of stuff to just explode on our lap, and for us to deal with it. Because I mean, I don't think there's ever been a better time. Like I think maybe in the 50s, like, man, this probably would have been really shocking to people. But now people are kind of like, yeah, of course it's true, right? People don't even trust the government. They think that they've been hiding this now. So I think the time's about right, and I think it's going to happen one way or another. But I don't think we're going to have like a shift one day that we're going to shift into like 5D, fifth dimensional awareness, right? I mean, I think it's a gradual down to earth process. That's just my thinking. But at the same time, I do think we're in this kind of pivotal moment, right? And we're right in the midst of it. So it's hard to be aware of it in the same way as when they look back 100 years from now and be like, holy shit, that must have been a crazy time to live, when you had this guy, the director of the program, came forward and this other whistleblower came forward. And, it's reading back in the history books is going to be interesting. It's going to be, it was like so obvious.
We're going to have to move. We have, let's see, we have 8 minutes more with James. So everything heretofore needs to be kind of a quick hitter, kind of an answer. And we have people that we have to get in here. Paul, extremely generous. Thank you very much. Debs, with your dulcet tones.
Any opinions on what exactly Havana syndrome's purpose might be? Data gathering, etc. Thanks for the great show.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your generosity. This is very helpful.
Wow, that I asked Jim about the Havana syndrome, I think, on 2 occasions, and I did ask another one of these actual whistleblower people about it too, and they gave me a similar response because they're in that field of in intelligence, and everybody I've spoken to basically is saying, like, you can make the technology pretty easily. You got to know what to do, obviously, but it is dangerous. The way that Jim worded it is very careful.
Yes.
Non-state actor. We heard similar things with Kit Green and Gary Nolan in their study, that they came across individuals like that, and even Dr. Gary Nolan had said those same words, non-state actor, in an interview he did. I think, I forget what was the news source, when he started to become public again in 2022, I believe. I can only imagine that they're using it as a means of influence. So,
Can I speak on this one real quick?
Yeah.
He said non-state military. So he said, think about that for a second. Non-state military. And the reason he doesn't want to speak more about it is because it's not a high-tech thing. It's obviously operating on a frequency that a lot of people could generate that frequency and cause serious damage to humans. And that's why he doesn't want to expound on it, is because you don't need to be a United States or a Russia or a China to be able to broadcast this type of a signal that would hurt.
Yeah, and you also don't want to directly blame X, Y, or Z without the exact proof to back it up, because that's you're making an accusation that is could be irresponsible, even if they suppose it's somebody.
So we have 6 minutes left with you, James. Once again, quick hitters on all these. This is my last one. We'll go to Courtney, and then if somebody else has something in the chat, we'll get to it. But we're running out of time. James has to go to work tonight. He gonna make some money, people. So give the man some love. So James, 2 things that were the most sort of earth-shattering for you. I had another word in mind, another descriptor, but coming out of that that interview with Jim, what were the 2 things that you found the most surprising, that kind of really opened your mind up, that you hadn't heard before?
I mean, I think the executive act and executive language thing was really big, especially coming from somebody like Jim. So, I mean, he made it a point to communicate that. And I had somebody reach out to me and say that they followed up on it to some degree, and that there is some kind of legitimacy towards that. It's an angle that can be worked, I guess, or that is potentially exactly as how he says it is. So I would say that is one important part. The other, I don't. It's hard to pick one or two things when I'm talking to Jim, because again, it's a 3-hour conversation and we're just like kicking it, man. And he's going in a million different directions.
One is good because we want to move. We're going to have you back again because like an hour and 15 minutes is not enough, to have you on.
I mean, I plan to stay on longer, but I got called in.
Absolutely, man. You got to go make that cheddar.
Yes, sir.
Courtney connected. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not expecting you to have read all the book that got released, but I started reading like the frontispiece of Lou's book because I thought that it was dropped through promotional, right? But apparently that's not the case. But I've already gotten through the frontispiece, which is basically, Chris Mellon talking about the intelligence community's failures in the past with regard to 9/11 and other things. And he's basically bringing that into the context, saying, we have all these potential intelligence failures happening with UAPs, right? Without having this open disclosure happening between the different agencies. So you have been one of the premier people who gets to get people who have been read in or have been in an intelligence agency. What do you think about Chris Mellon's comments that this could be a potential another huge catastrophic failure by the intelligence community? Are you kind of seeing that in your conversations and in your interviews that there's been a breakdown, or do you think that we're seeing repair and seeing them working together more now to get disclosure so we don't have a huge intelligence failure with UAPs and disclosure?
Christopher Mellon is extremely, I think everybody's seen this as just like an extremely calculated and intelligent individual, and he knows exactly what he's doing when he speaks in that manner, right? So I can't say what the outcome of his actions have been, because I haven't seen all the inner workings and have the bird's eye view, at least that he has, right? Maybe he has the 30,000 foot view. I don't know, but for sure, a lot of the things that we're seeing unfold now are through coordinated efforts of himself, Lou, and many others, right? Some we know and some we don't know. So I think it would be wise to listen to what Christopher Mellon is saying.
Yeah, he's just under the cabinet level as an undersecretary. So, to have a guy like that, it's just an embarrassment of riches. And then have these two newer gentlemen that 24 months ago, we didn't know Carl Nell existed. We probably didn't know Admiral Gallaudet existed. And now Admiral Gallaudet is on he basically was the featured guest for that documentary with Darcy Weir about USOs. So we're in an incredible place here, that where we are, and there's a lot of disclosure that's out there. It's just, people want to see artifacts, and I get it. We all do. I do. Nathan does. James does. Everybody does. But the place that we're in is right. We all want to.
Well, like Peter Levenda, I had Peter Levenda on too, and he said we all want to see the bodies, right? We're bringing out the alien bodies. He always says that, facetiously. That could be taken very negatively, and I understand why. And but in a facetious manner.
We asked this question of Vinny. When he was on. So we'll ask you real quick. If they brought you in, you roll into S4, you get read in, you get badged in, the retinal scan, the whole 9 yards, and they say to you, okay, you can come in this hangar and you can board a craft and we'll sort of fire it up, so that you can see the systems work, or you can come in this other room and you could sit down with one of the live beings.
I would definitely rather interact with an entity. But it brings me back to that email chain memo thing where Kit Green was saying that they showed him autopsy pictures, and he believed that they were maybe tricking him. So could you even, in that kind of scenario, could you even trust that the contact is true, that the interaction is not some kind of stagecraft? And I mean, that's not even touching my labs, right?
Right. Absolutely. You
Because
couldn't. You wouldn't know unless you saw it fly. You wouldn't. You wouldn't necessarily know. Could be a mock-up. Absolutely.
it's
You're right.
controlled. Yeah.
Yeah. Courtney, this one's for you. So, first of all, hello, Woo Riders DG. So, Courtney, would you please, with your dulcet tones?
I have a voice like Kathleen Turner. Everybody knows that. So I don't know if that's a dulcet tone, but it's definitely an alto tone.
Yes.
Courtney.
Kathleen Turner.
Yeah, Courtney, Department of Energy whistleblower coming soon. Very soon. Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Isn't that awesome? DOEOGG, says Julie. All right, James, we promised we were going to get you out of here on the quarter hour. Then I'm going to play Age of Aquarius for everybody in the chat. So, cabbies, quick goodbyes for James, please.
Is it me first?
Courtney, you are connected. And this is a great show. We have James here, so we can say engaging in phenomenon without having to pay a royalty, and we can say connected without having to pay Courtney anything. So go ahead.
James, you're a huge influencer. I'm one of your biggest fans, and I love all your work. I dissect every interview you ever do. I take copious notes on it, and I use it to the yard. I use all that information with all the people that I talk to. So keep doing all the good work that you're doing, and I'll keep listening and taking notes.
Tabs.
I look forward to finding out more about this presentation that you also kept dropping hints of. I want to know what's going on with you next. I want to know all the details. Thank you for everything that you do, of course. And for people who don't know, the behind the scenes part is James is just putting people together and he is connecting dots. So please tell us about all the dots in the future.
James, it's been awesome, man. I look forward to having you back on the show. I hope I get a chance to see you sometime soon. I'll be up your way, your neck of the woods in a couple weeks. I'll try to connect with you if I can. But just a wealth of information. And to echo what everyone says, your interviews have been amazing. I can remember like where I was hearing some of them because they were that impactful on me. So thank you for what you do, for your tireless efforts in this topic. Hugely appreciated. And also thanks to all the folks that came to show your support for James in the chat. You got a lot of fans in the chat, and rightly so. Yeah, you're a big ticket, so we're excited to have you, and wish you all the best, of course.
James, we love you and we respect you so much. I mean, I can't say any more than that. We just love you, and everybody here does. So this was a special night for us. You're just the best at what you do, and have a good night tonight, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I know all of you. I've spoken to all of you many times. I wish I could spend more time with you tonight, and in general. You guys are doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing. So it's just the way that it looks, whatever, right? It's but you guys are all doing exactly the same thing. So we just have to keep at it together. And next time we need like a Jim Semivan type show, and we're just going to go all out for at least 3 hours, right?
And Deb, thank God Deb came up with that one at the end. Thank you, Deb. That was great. So yes, we did. We need more time. So have a great night. And I haven't booked my ticket to New York yet because of my move, but I will. I'll let you know when that is, so I can hopefully meet up with you back in our hometown.
Yeah, definitely. I'll speak to you guys soon.
Bye.
Cheers.
All right. Here it is, guys. Let's get it here. Let me share screen. All right, and see if I can make this go. Let's see. There we go. All right, let me see if we can do this. Can you guys see it or no? No?
Nope, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, okay, wait. Let's see. Can you see it now? No?
No, I can
Oh,
add
there
it.
you go.
There we go. Ooh, we got the Inception thing happening.
Oh. I might need a lesson on, but you can hear it?
I didn't hear anything either.
Oh, you can't hear it? Oh.
I think
I
we all
mean,
know
in
what you were
my
going
head, I
for.
hear it.
I can hear that in my head too. Yeah, it's a.
Oh, wait, let me try again. Maybe I just don't know. So I hit share screen, Nathan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this tab. Maybe I hit this. Oh. Okay. Now? No?
Nothing on my end.
No? Okay. I guess I don't know how to do it then. All right. Cool. I can hear it.
But it's the coming of a certain time, right? It's
You
setting
got
the
to use
stage.
telepathy.
Yeah.
I don't know
It's
why it doesn't work. When you do it, do you use share tab or how do you do it?
It depends on, I think, like how it's. I mean, I've done YouTube shared tab before, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know why it's not working for you.
Chrome
But
tab.
it's
Oh,
okay,
Chrome.
because if you
That's
play,
all
we're
right.
probably gonna get a copyright strike anyway. So
You
it's
think?
all good. Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, I didn't think we would. Okay. All right. Anyway, dudes.
What a great
So,
interview.
Yeah. What'd you think?
I mean, it's James. He's incredible.
I know it's like it's James, everybody. It's James.
It's James. I mean, for those who don't know, and I think we mentioned it at the show, but James is like connective glue in the community. He's very humble. He's very thoughtful. I remember when I was just kind of getting started and interested in this topic, I just sent him a private message, knowing that he was a busy guy and a lot of interactions, and I just said, "Hey, I'm thinking about this or that." And he interacted with me right away and really encouraged me to continue pursuing this. So I owe a lot to James in being here. He's just a very encouraging person. So not only is he engaging the phenomena, he's encouraging.
Now we have to pay a royalty.
Yeah, I
because
know.
he's not here.
Dang it.
Okay. All right.
And he's literally a giant in the community. And I've actually hidden behind him to protect me before.
He's the Joe Rogan of the UAP community, man. He really is. He's the best of the best. And he I was thinking, I think I emailed him when I first heard him. I guess it was probably maybe just before I met Nathan. And so I messaged him and he messaged me back. He said Mohegan Lake. So we started talking about how far we live away from each other. And then I decided to go and do a Twitter space, when I first was aware of it. And nobody obviously came in my space because nobody knew who I was. And why would you log on to a UFO space with some guy that you don't know? Well, James saw that and decided that he was going to come onto that space to rescue me. He didn't do that. Like he didn't know that I knew that, but I knew exactly what he was doing. And as soon as people saw that he was on that space, they just came like gangbusters to come and join that space and talk UFOs. So I'll never forget that. He felt bad for me that he wanted to show up, and that's the first time I ever spoke with him. Was that time. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, he's a good dude. I think everyone's got cool stories just like that. Like I think everybody in this room would say that, and including many of our listeners who have interacted with James. He's just so accessible, and he takes time for himself. He's really thoughtful. He's one of the more, I think, introspective people who's working on this subject, and also incredibly knowledgeable. He has a depth of knowledge that you won't find many other places. So yeah, just a great guest. I mean, look, we had a wonderful interview with him, and obviously can't wait to have him back. Maybe on a roundtable. We haven't done one of those in a long time. So
yeah, that would be great. Have a UFO roundtable.
I have a
Courtney,
question.
maybe you have. I just want to see if Courtney has a memory of meeting James or something.
I have a totally chain reaction story about James where I was writing a book and he had written a blog post about the Caudate Ptamen study on his Terra Obscura And so I found him that way. And so I don't actually remember how we connected, but we connected somehow. And then through that, I met Gary Nolan and interviewed him for my book about the Caudate-Putamen study. And then eventually he brought me on Engaging the Phenomenon to talk about my Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies paper. And then from there, he introduced me into a Fight Club group with a bunch of researchers. So James actually, my interactions with him led to a whole bunch of other really positive, impactful work. We did the interview about my paper to Bix. He read the whole thing, went into great detail. We had a great interview about it on Engaging the Phenomenon. So my interactions with him have been nothing but incredibly impactful. And he's just very thoughtful. Like I said, he read my whole paper and then we discussed it all. And, you know, that's a hard thing to do, to get somebody to read a 60-page paper. And so I've just been nothing but incredibly impressed by his ability to analyze things, take the time, learn people's stories, connect them with other people, hugely influential. And I just don't have anything but positive things to say about him. He's just a wonderful, amazing human individual, and we are so lucky to have him in the community.
That very, very well said. And just so everyone that's watching right now in the chat, this is what we call after cab. Normally now we have shut the cameras off and we do what you're seeing right now. This is kind of like the backstage. So that's why I put hashtag after cab. This is generally what happens. So Debs, you were going to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure Courtney got in there with her memories of him as well. Cause I thought you gave yours. Maybe I missed you. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I haven't said my memory of James, but I can tell you he was my first ever cab interview. And actually after that episode, he and I spoke for like another 2 hours or so. And I've interviewed him on, Deb's Data Dojo. I interviewed him when I was doing stuff for UAP Med. He and I, like when you meet him, because I got to meet him in New York, he just feels like family. That's the vibe he gives off, and he just is very easy and comforting to talk to. Although I do think he needs to make sure to take care of himself. Like I felt like that was the urge I had, but I was like, go take care of yourself. Make sure you rest, get some food, because he does work really hard.
Looking good, man. He's looking good to me.
He's cut down for sure.
He's like the Olive Garden, He's your family.
I think he took your advice, Deb. He's looking good and very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes, go ahead. Yeah.
So the other thing, that like is bothering me, like I can't let it go, is this indigestible thing. And that was the question I wanted to throw out, like just full speculation what we think might be indigestible. I have my own, and I can throw mine out when you guys are done it or before or whatever, but I just want everyone to just get a chance to think about that.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that, and then we'll get to Bogan's.
I asked him that. I asked him to speculate, but he wouldn't. So I thought that was interesting that he wouldn't speculate.
We'll get to Bogan. We're going to get to your experience that you have here in a minute, but let's PBC too. I don't know if it's Panama City Beach, but so yeah, let's go around the room with Deb's question. Money. What is not digestible other than prime rib that's not cooked?
Yeah, right. So Levenda really seized on that word too. So I think listening to Semivan and then listening to the Levenda interview, because Levenda goes into that indigestible concept a little bit more. And he has a certain take on it. I think is interesting. It's something that the word, you can consume it, right? But you're not getting anything from it. It essentially kind of passes through you. So you're not equipped to digest the information. And I think that's partly what we're alluding to here, is that the reality of what this is something that as a whole, I'm not saying individuals, because there are plenty of individuals who have lots of different life experience and who I'm sure can digest some of this, but as a whole, and this is what people have to consider, right? When you're in these agencies and you're part of these large government structures and you've got to make decisions that affect the lives of millions and billions of people, like you have to think about society as a whole. That's just, unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation that you find yourself. And I think as a whole, our society just really isn't well equipped to to digest, absorb, metabolize is a word that Darren likes to use, metabolize the information, because it is just really more complicated. And I've always thought this. If it were as simple as extraterrestrials just appearing on Earth and us interacting with them, just like you would interact with somebody from a foreign country, then they would have already told us about this a long time ago. And I may be naive in that regard, but I think that is
right.
much easier to explain than what the reality of this is. I think it includes that. I think that's part of it, but it's much more complicated than just that alone. And it gets to the other aspect that Semivan alludes to, Levenda does as well. It's almost beyond our ability to understand it. It exceeds our current understanding, because we've tried. A lot of folks have tried to really get at all the aspects of what this is, and we're falling short in some areas. We understand pieces of it, but not all of it. And I think that it's sort of like asking an ant to understand, human society and values and ethics and science. I mean, it can get maybe just a tiny, tiny fraction of what that is, if anything at all. And so, when you think about it in those terms, I think it becomes a little clearer, at least to me, to see why they would use a term like indigestible. It's more than we can really take on.
Yeah, it speaks to also types of persons. And we are here. The reason that all of us are here and all of you are in the chat is because we've realized that we all have a propensity to want to know the unknown. And we're, as Jim put it in that, because we're doing a lot of quoting Jim tonight, and it's because he's brilliant and he's really, really well read, which you all are here on the cab panel as well. I won't include myself in that. He said, there's so many of us in these groups that we're in here that are comfortable with ambiguity. And we think everybody is like us, right? That's why the country has all these political strife, because they think everybody should be like me. And if they're not like me, they're an idiot, or there's something wrong with them. They're not critically thinking. If you don't love this political candidate or that, clearly there's something wrong with you and you're not a critical thinker. That's what these groups think about one another. Well, we can sometimes, just through naivete, not realize that the rest of the world is not like us necessarily. And we meet these people. We had that round table with the Scandinavians, and there's all these Brits that are in this topic. And, there was a wonderful Brazilian man on with Ross the other day talking eloquently about stuff in Brazil, and Deb's aware of all this stuff in Chile and Brazil. So, but not everybody's like us. We're still a very, very small group of people that are comfortable with ambiguity, that are comfortable not knowing what our genesis was. And when we're ready to hear that information, go, oh, wow, look at that, man. Like what Dan Sherman said, we're from the same creator as these grays. That's interesting. And all sentient beings are, or, and that these, whatever about, somebody who's as deeply held religious beliefs, they do not want that challenged. Who knows how Tim and Smitty would react if they found out the truth. That could be extremely destabilizing for them. So that's my take on it.
I wish I could give my take, but I'm down to like my last little sliver on my battery. Okay. So I don't want to get kicked off before I give my take. But
all right, let's get
before I die.
Yes, love. Don't die.
One of the things that happens in a vacuum when there is the mystery is that humans are so curious and imaginative, and our minds go to all these incredible places, dark places, horrific places, right? It's just part of our curiosity and where it goes. So instead of me commenting on the indigestible and why this information might be indigestible, I think what's happening is, because we don't know and there is a mystery, we're going to make up all kinds of things in that vacuum, which are horrific, wonderful, beautiful. It's every part of the human experience. So I think the danger in using things like indigestible is it could to some very dark places, just naturally out of our own thought process of wondering what this is. So I think that's a danger potentially, to use the word indigestible, to say that we can't, or we don't have the capacity to handle it, or we can't process it.
Well, we is not you and me. We is everyone, because that's who you're disclosing to.
Agreed.
That's the thing.
I think if this is humanity, this is an underpinning of the human experience potentially, that, you know, we would potentially not be able to process this. I'm not saying us, I'm saying humanity at large. I'm not commenting about us. So I just think that's the danger in using words like that. It makes us go to potentially darker places to imagine what this could be.
Yeah,
Very good
I mean, yeah, Lou had the very similar thought process. Richard Doty had the same thought process that he told us, and then Jim did. So yeah, they're not. They can't be the judge of what's digestible and digestible to everybody. But they're saying that not everybody is comfortable in that realm. I think that's all that they're saying, and that maybe the people that are comfortable don't represent the most of us. Go ahead and somebody read this from Bogan right here, please. And then because we want Courtney here till the last moment of cab tonight. Let's get through
there
it.
you go. All right,
Plug in your phone.
So Bogan says, I was 16. Me and my friend are driving in Palm Beach County, Florida before dusk. He spots a red orb. We pull over and several others appear. Some zip in at lightning speeds and others appear from seemingly nowhere.
Wow.
It's quite an experience.
It's part 2.
Oh, dozens of others pull over, including an officer, to witness this spectacle. A week or so later, someone let flares on weather balloons, and the news reported that. Interesting.
Lit flares. And
yeah, so we think it was potentially flares, but
New York cover-up.
Very possible. I mean, depending on the movement of these orbs that you saw, if they were really rapid, sort of showed some of that instant acceleration. Flares can't do that. Last time I checked. So
yeah, they just fall ballistically, and they, so. Yeah, that's an amazing experience, Bogan. Really, that's a show that, I mean, everybody that's on this broadcast right now would love to have a show like that. Deb talks about it all the time. Come on, damn it. All right. Here's the last part is, I reported it to MUFON, but nobody else that was there has that I know of. Okay, I wish that the other people who were there could back me up. I can't find the news story either, but a real investigator probably could. Oh, there you go. We got something for Debs and Courtney. Courtney's doing something not that important right now, only looking for a missing person that was almost certainly murdered. But other than that, she doesn't have that much going on. But that's what she's doing right now.
She's doing amazing work.
Yeah, Calling All Beings, True Crime Unsolved is something that we're trying to launch. Our first case is a missing woman named Shelva Rafty, 44-year-old mother from Pittston, PA. And Courtney's there right now investigating this case. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, cabbies. After cab on the mic, baby.
I like it. Nice. Soft and smooth.
Thank you. On behalf of Deb, do you have any final comment before we go, my friend?
Well, I was going to give my hypothesis about what was going on with indigestible. I'm going to go to one of those things, one of those speculations that Courtney was saying we do go to. What if it turns out our souls are not human?
I'm okay with it.
I think that's where you naturally go, but
Nathan, that was
in addition to that, then you go to the ship with the tubes that Linda Moulton Howe, interviewed the Eben, and it was all about reincarnation, and I think that's some of our darkest fears right there. So,
but it isn't completely a dark fear. Like when we talk about religion, we're not talking about entities that live on Earth. They're always coming from a different place. They're always non-human.
I'm here for it, man.
There's definitely some rabbit holes we could go down on that one. So I'm not opposed at all. And I certainly think that reincarnation plays a role in all of what's going on here.
It's clear when you see some of those young kids that, that knew historical events that they couldn't have been alive to know. Clear that there's something. Yes,
and I feel like that thought happened after I listened to James' interview, because things like that were mentioned, and consciousness were mentioned, and religion was mentioned, and I'm like, it seems like that would be something that might be to a lot of people something they're not ready to hear. But I'm totally cool with my soul being alien. Just saying.
Yeah, we're cool with none of us are here like, yeah, whatever the story is, man, this is awesome. And other people are like, oh my God, like I need to find something to jump off of. So it's just, we're all different, man. Everybody's going to process this differently,
We
Anyway,
need to do a next show called Indigestible.
it
We all bring our theories and speculation to the indigestible.
the next episode of Cab is going to be a calling all beans. What do we call that? Off the meter, indigestible.
That's right.
I'm thinking of, isn't there I don't know, there's a song that sounds very similar, and I'm trying to think is it Irresistible, Baby You Are? Anyway,
I was thinking of the digestif. You have a little thing that you can help you enjoy the food that you had for dinner. So
We can bring all of our concoctions of our digestif to our
Really?
indigestible to help it be more digestible.
brilliant.
all right, let's say thank you to Bogan. Thank you to Bogan. Thank you for sharing your story. Cable is here. Everybody that's remaining in the chat, looks like there's 16 of you. Thank you so much, everybody that or is watching. If you sign into your YouTube and you subscribe to Cab, it's free. That's all you need to do to be able to chat. You don't need to pay anything. We do really appreciate the first super chats we've ever received. Thank you so much. It'll help Nathan and I and Debs pay for these StreamYards. And, maybe we can give Courtney some gas money. God, goodness gracious, driving all over the place, shifting gears. I love that metaphor earlier when you said we're shifting gears. So on behalf of Julie, Courtney, Debs, and Money Nathan, this is DJ saying peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road. And we're always wondering, especially down where Courtney's at, what's around the bend.